Hey there folks, welcome to this video, and here I'm going to be talking about the WRC, and I'm going to be talking about driver contracts. Because about this time last season we knew more or less what the WRC was going to look like in 2019. We knew that Sébastien Ogier was going to be returned to Citroen, we knew that Chris Beek was going to be returned to the WRC full-time with Toyota, and Esa-Pekka Lappi was also going to be going to Citroen. We knew that Thierry Neuville had signed a lengthy deal with Hyundai that taken him through to the end of this set of regulations. We knew that we'd also see Andreas Mikkelsen continuing his contract, and we knew that Danny Sordo was going to be there on a part-time basis. We also knew that Tänak and Jari-Matti were going to be staying on with Toyota, and we also knew that M Sport were going to have Teemu and Elfyn. However, we had a couple of late surprises. The arrival of Sebastian Loeb to Hyundai, the stepping back to 2 cars for Citroen after the withdrawal of Abu Dhabi, and yeah, during the season, the kind of third cars that Ford would use with Pontus Tiedemann and Gus Greensmith, and in Australia, Hayden and Padden. And also the Hyundai appearance for Craig Breen and the dropping of Mikkelsen for a good couple of rounds as well. So with us changing the picture to 2020, we know that Citroen have got Lappi and Ogier in Ogier's final season, and that should be for the full season. We know that Neuville is doing the full season, and we know that Sordo and Loeb are doing a split season again. There could potentially be like this season where they end up doing the same event as each other. We don't know what's happening with Ford, we don't know what's happening with Toyota. And so in this video I want to do some kind of rumours about that. And I will potentially look at the WRC rule changes regarding WRC 2. And I think we should start off by talking about that. So the rule changes for next season mean that WRC 2 and WRC 2 Pro change their names. WRC 2 Pro becomes WRC 2, so that's the works entry, so your Skodas, your Citroen works team, potentially a Hyundai, and of course M Sport. WRC 2 for the privateers becomes WRC 3. Now, there are multiple ways of taking this. I take it from a bit of a cynical view, which is it's designed to give the manufacturers more screen time and privateers less. But at the same time, it could be a good springboard. And it could be a good way of making sure you keep drivers in your roster. Because if they're contracted to drive for WRC 2, they're not necessarily bound by the same kind of testing regulations as somebody who enters in the works team in WRC. This is something that we've seen with Mads Osberg, and is potentially why he isn't driving for the works Citroen team whilst the car is supplied and maintained by them in Australia. And I think we could see this more and more next season. I reckon we could see some drivers doing split programs where they're in the World Rally car for some events and WRC 2 for some others. A bit like Gus Greensmith in a way, but also a bit like was going to happen for Pontus and has happened for Hayden. Though I think Citroen won't do that. I think that Citroen will, if they are going to have a full campaign, they'll commit Mads Osberg to it and potentially Eric Cameli. And that will be to try and evaluate them for longer term. Like I said, this is Ogier's final season, so they'll be keeping an eye on 2021 and potentially 2022 if they're going to commit to building a car to new regulations. And well, that's Citroen talked about, because it's relatively easy to talk about them. We're not expecting them to expand to a third car unless they get a major sponsorship deal or a massive investment from PSA Peugeot Citroen Group. But we can expect some good developments in the car. The new aero looks amazing, and they've got new suspension coming in for next season. So let's turn our eyes to Toyota now. And the reason why is because that's probably the most up-in-the-air team. You've got the championship leader, Tänak. You've got Chris Meek and Jari-Matti Latvala, all three of them out of contract at the end of the season. And in the wings, you've also got Kalle Rovanperä and Takamoto Katsuta. So what could happen with Toyota? Well, the latest rumours are that it will be Tänak, Meek and Rovanperä in the lineup. The rumours that they were going to have a satellite team where essentially Rovanperä and Katsuta would be doing like rallies to help train them up for a works drive seem to have petered out, which is a shame. I'd love to see more top flight cars, even if it is like in the satellite B team, because it gives more seat time to other drivers. And it also means that they could potentially do what Hyundai did in 2016, where they rotated around Sordo, Neville and Padden into different cars. So you'd have the two works drivers and then the person in the third sort of works car as well. It was interesting because it was the second team that picked up both the rally wins that season. Yeah, it would be a shame if Jari-Matti gets dropped, especially because personally he's one of my favourite drivers. But I don't think he will be forced into a place where he'd have to retire from the sport because of M Sport, and I'll move over to them now. M Sport have got Teemu Selänne and Elfyn Evans as their, full-time contracted drivers. Of course, Evans took a couple of rounds out the season recovering from injuries sustained in Estonia. But I reckon that because they're both out of contract, Malcolm Wilson and Rich Milner are potentially looking around. We saw statements being released saying, we hope that they find full-time drives next season, because M Sport were eyeing up someone like Rovanperä. Now, they could pull a massive twist and sign Kalle. They really could. And he would bring in Red Bull sponsorship. And in that case, they potentially retain Elfyn because he also carries some Red Bull sponsorship as well. But I reckon that as much as most other people in the service park do, Kalle's going to go to Toyota, where it's been rumoured he's already signed a kind of pre-contract. So what do I think about Latvala? I think Latvala would return to M Sport if he wanted to stay in WRC. It's something that we've seen drivers do in the past. If they were given their first big break with M Sport, go back to them for like their final couple of rallies. Petter Solberg did it in 2012, and Mika Hirvonen, same in 2014. So I would potentially put that as a rumour. I'd like to see Teemu and Elfyn stay as well, though I reckon that if they don't, they'll be somewhere within the M Sport family, especially Elfyn because of his kind of family involvement with Windaf as well. And they'd potentially go into WRC2 team. And this is where I'm going to talk about the other drivers they've had this season: Pontus Tiedemund, Hayden Patton and Gus Greensmith, because I've seen a specific request in the comments from, sorry if I mispronounced the name, Nomus, asking about Pontus. Now, I reckon that they would be all entered, if they were wanting to stay with M Sport, into WRC2. Potentially doing a program similar to what Greensmith did, where, just depending on sponsorship funding, you do WRC2 and some select WRC events. I think that would work out for some of these drivers. It gives them regular seat time, and especially for someone like Pontus, who we know is dominant in WRC2 in the right car. Could be an eye at a championship, and it could give M Sport a victory over Skoda in that title. Honestly, I think if any team's going to do that, it's most likely going to be M Sport, because, Citroen are likely to keep a very separate program between their WRC2 and their main WRC one. So, I would say, if we're going off the basis that Citroen are Ogier and Lappi, and Toyota are Tänak, Meek and Rovanperä, I reckon M Sport will be Latvala, Evans and a split third car. And then we get on to Hyundai. Hyundai is one of the more fascinating ones. I'd argue they're the reason why we see the kind of split contract system re-emerging in the WRC. They also don't have an extensive WRC2 program. but they have been having people test their car for the Pirelli tyre test. Andreas Mikkelsen was one of these people. And speaking of Mikkelsen, he's now going to be out of contract at the end of the season. So far, Hyundai have Neuville, who's contracted to the end of 2021. They also have Danny Sordo and Sebastian Loeb, who are in a kind of car-sharing strategy similar to this season. But also waiting in the wings, they will have Mikkelsen, they'll have Breen, they'll have Padden. And also potentially Jari Huttunen. Like I said, they don't have really any WRC2 program at the moment, so I wouldn't be surprised if they decided, ooh, this is the chance that we could compete for another championship, develop the R5 further, and get their current works drivers to compete in other events. Now, I don't think Loeb would want to do that. Loeb has been very much set in the kind of, I want to do the events that I want to do. And, well, is anyone going to try and boss Sebastian Loeb around? But Sordo could potentially do a couple of R5 outings. We saw him do Rally Zin last season in the ERC. Mikkelsen would potentially do it. Like I said, we saw him testing the Pirelli tyre test. Craig Breen, potentially. We saw him using an R5 in the Irish Tarmac Championship after he'd been with Hyundai in Finland. And potentially Padden, if he wanted. And then what you could do, this is something that I've also suggested for M Sport, but it's something I've been suggesting a couple of times throughout this season as well. What you can do is you can have the drivers doing some rounds in WRC2, some rounds in the works team. So you could have more kind of rotations and lineups. It's a way of managing a satellite team whilst also making sure they're competing for their own championship, whilst also making sure you can develop the car more, develop the drivers more, and develop your team more. I honestly think that would be an amazing idea. I really do. And, well, at this point, let's just check the time. Oh, wow! Sorry about that. It's a very lengthy video. We're now, over 12 minutes, so I'm just going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope I haven't put too much information in. And, well, I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye for now.